Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update. This was the one left over from yesterday the 13th. It's now the 14th. It's geopolitics news concerning the US with regard to Ukraine and also a little bit of US political news in general, which I think fits into the broader what direction is US moving in terms of autocracy and corruption and whatnot, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so Zelensky wants to meet with Biden again and persuade him to invite Ukraine to NATO, says Andriy Yermak. There's no Trump plan to end the war yet, but there are several positions that are being discussed, he added. I wonder whether there is a little bit of panic going on in the Ukrainian corridors of power, whereby Trump at the moment is saying things that are a little bit scary in terms of being vehemently against deep strikes into Russia, wanting to cut aid to Ukraine, even though there are those who are still hopeful. I think there are a lot of signs at the moment to indicate that, yeah, it's not looking great. Here's a positive sign that Kellogg, or that Trump has at least some half-decent people around, although he's very bullish for Trump. But the problem is that Trump hasn't said these positive things himself. He said nothing positive about Ukraine, as in morally, politically speaking. So he never talks about Ukraine fighting for its right as a sovereign nation to exist, and he's never said Russia invaded and Putin is a murderous dictator, and he's never evaluated the war in its clear moral political terms. He's always said real neutral both sidesism kind of stuff, which is, I want the war to stop, too many people are dying. Well, yeah, we all know that, but have you accorded Russia the moral culpability for this that is deserved? No. But anyway, Keith Kellogg here says, I really do believe that the war in Ukraine is going to get solved within the next few months, because the only person who can do that is President Donald J. Trump. So this is very much cheerleading for Trump there. The question is not ending the war by itself, says Gerashchenko. It's ending it with a just and sustainable peace that really matters. And this is key, because not only have we not heard from Trump and his administration a clear moral evaluation of the war and the people involved, but when Trump keeps talking about ending the war, he just says, I want the war ended as quickly as possible. I want people to stop dying. He's never either said he wants a just, what he's actually said, he wants it fair for both sides. So that's what happened when Zelensky saw him in the US. Previously, I was during a NATO conference in the US. He was talking about how he wants the peace to be fair for both sides, negotiations fair for both sides. You look, what? No, like that's not how it works. When some, like I always say, if, like old Doris next door gets a house, poor old Doris gets a house broken in, and thugs ransacking a house, and the police come along and say, hey, right, let's make sure this is fair for both sides. Okay? We need this sorted out, but it needs to be fair for both sides. You would go, no, absolutely not. But I'm sorry, that is a good analogy, because that is what's happened in Ukraine. Ukraine has been invaded by an aggressive nation that is ransacking the country and killing its people, and you've got Donald Trump coming along saying, hey, we want this fair for both sides. There's never once this rhetoric to do with a lasting and just peace. It needs to be just. Justice needs to be meted out. But no, we don't hear that from Keith Kellogg. And here's a guy that's supposed to be, one of the good guys in the Trump administration. We just don't hear that kind of rhetoric. Now, Michael McFaul, the previous ambassador to Russia, says if Trump threatens to cut aid to Ukraine, Putin will be even more emboldened to keep fighting, not end his invasion. Advancing armies rarely stop fighting when their opponent is about to become weaker. If Putin senses that Trump and his new team are trying to appease the Kremlin, he will become more aggressive and not less. And this is his piece from his piece in Foreign Affairs, how Trump can end the war in Ukraine, convince Kyiv to trade land for NATO membership. And I'd agree, NATO membership, security guarantees have to be at the top of the list. But of course, that's something that Trump specifically doesn't want to happen. Time has published. So there was a Time magazine interview, because Trump got Person of the Year from Time magazine, and they provided an interview, and we're going to look at a little bit at the interview in a second with what it says on Ukraine. But just to let you know that Time has also published a 2,800 word fact check of its interview with Trump. I mean, that's not happened with really many other people concerning like Person of the Year. Hey, here's an interview with Person of the Year. And now we're going to do a massive fact check of everything they say, because everything they say, it appears to be dubious. There's a lot of statements that need checking, says Brian Stelter here. Wow. So that's what Time has done. Now, what I like that Time do is they produce the transcript of the interview to go alongside the actual edited piece that they put in, article, if you like, where they'll like tidy up the answers and make it all coherent. But when you read the original statements, you're like, yo, what? So Time did not edit Trump for clarity, and yikes. So here's one of the answers he gave. But we're going to bring back record jobs. Record companies are going to come into our country. They're not going to be able to steal our companies anymore. And I talked about that, but I differed maybe perhaps from you people. I thought the economy was a big factor, especially the real economy, which is the economy of going out and buying groceries or buying a car or buying a house, which was, between interest rates and between costs. As an example, the cost of a house is a big chunk of the cost of the house is just the approval process and the regulations. What? And indeed, Aaron Rupert then says, what to this? Will you commit to honouring the Senate's authority to reject or confirm your nominees? Well, sure, I want them to do that. I don't think there are too many. I don't think that, look, everybody has, that's why they have menus in restaurants. You have different choices. Some people love certain candidates. I'll tell you, I put up some that I thought would be a little more controversial, and they turned out not to be necessarily the ones that are controversial. I'll tell you what, there are some proper controversial ones, and we're going to come on to them. Right, let's go on to Trump and Ukraine then. So this is from the Time magazine, what he said about Ukraine. So the question, I'm going to shift to foreign policy. Have you spoken to Vladimir Putin since your election? Trump says, I can't tell you. It's just inappropriate. Okay, cool. If Ukraine doesn't agree to a peace deal that you have said you will broker, will you cut military, humanitarian and intelligence assistance to them? The answer, the reason that I don't like to tell you this is that as a negotiator, when I sit down and talk to some very brilliant young people, young, compared to me, you're very young. But when I talk to people, when I start to think I have a very good plan to help, but when I start exposing that plan, it becomes almost a worthless plan. Okay, in amongst that absolute nonsense, or at least word salad, is a correct point that actually you should not, if you're going to be negotiating on behalf of or with these two nations, you need to keep quiet about what your cards are. You don't lay out your cards. The problem is he's already done that. So he said to Kristen Welker in Meet the Press, NBC News, we're going to we're going to reduce the aid to Ukraine. In other words, he's already told Putin that he's going to reduce the aid to Ukraine. And as I've said before, that is most of the leverage in the entire debate, in the entire negotiations. And he said that leverage, he's already said, yeah, we're not going to give Ukraine that. So I can't even use that to leverage against Russia. It's absolutely ridiculous. So he's right, but he's not done it. Will you commit to protecting Ukrainian sovereignty, though, from Russia? Would you commit to protecting their sovereignty from Russia? I would like to see Ukraine. Okay, ready? You have to go back a little bit further. It would never have happened if I were president. Would have never happened. But it has happened, says the questioner. This is great. So the question people want to know is, would you abandon Ukraine? would like to have heard him restate, would you have protected Ukrainian sovereignty? But would you abandon Ukraine? So this is good because Trump didn't answer that question. He evaded answering whether he would protect Ukrainian sovereignty because he won't. He's not interested in Ukrainian sovereignty. He's not interested in Ukraine. He doesn't understand the value of supporting Ukraine. So Trump says, it makes it so bad. What? And I had a meeting recently with a group of people from the government where they come in and brief me, and I'm not speaking about out of turn. The numbers of dead soldiers that have been killed in the last month are numbers that are staggering, both Russians and Ukrainians, and the amounts are fairly equal. This is a really revealing. I mean, if this is true, that is very revealing. You know, I know they like to say they weren't, but they're fairly equal. But the numbers of dead young soldiers lying on fields all over the place are staggering. It's crazy what's taking place. It's crazy. Remember, he's not been asked what the death numbers are. He's been asked whether he would abandon Ukraine or not. I disagree very vehemently with sending missiles hundreds of miles into Russia. Why are we doing that? We're just escalating this war and making it worse. So this is back to me. He doesn't understand why those restrictions were lifted, and you got North Koreans involved. He doesn't understand the effect of guided glide bombs and the numbers of those being sent into Ukraine. This is just a terrible answer. That should not have been allowed to be done. Why not? Give me a reason for that, please, Trump. Now they're doing, he says escalation, but it's not escalation. It hasn't been escalatory. They sent one Oreshnik missile into Dnipro. That was it. Saber rattling. It's not been escalatory. So you are not telling the truth, or you don't understand. He continues. Now they're doing not only missiles, but they're doing other types of weapons. What? And I think that's a very big mistake, But the number of people dying is number one, not sustainable. And I'm talking on both sides. It's really an advantage on both sides to get this thing done. So again, we've gone back to both sidesism. It's not a just peace. It's a we just need to stop this because people are dying. That's not what you were asked. You were asked, would you abandon Ukraine? So the questioner is getting frustrated here and says the question that many Americans and many people around the world have is, will you abandon Ukraine? To which Trump answers, I want to reach an agreement, and the only way you're going to reach an agreement is not to abandon. You understand what that means, right? And the questioner says, right, well, no, tell me. Because I've just said, will you abandon Ukraine? And you said, eventually you said, well, not abandoning them is reaching an agreement. In other words, he's going to force an agreement, and he interprets that as not abandoning them. He's not interested in their sovereignty. He's not interested in Ukraine prevailing. His understanding of not abandoning Ukraine is to force through an agreement that stops people dying, but it's not interested in justice. So he says, well, the interviewer says, well, tell me. And Trump says, well, I just said it. You can't reach an agreement if you abandon, in my opinion. And I disagree with the whole thing because it should never have happened. Putin would never have invaded Ukraine if I were president for numerous reasons. Absolute rubbish. They invaded in 2014. This is just the latest iteration of that. Number one, they drove up the oil price. When they drove up the oil price, they made it a profit-making situation for him. The oil price should have been driven down. If it was driven down, you wouldn't have had it. You wouldn't have started for pure economic reasons. But when it hits $80, $85, and $90 a barrel, I mean, he made a lot of money. I'm not saying it's a good thing because he's also suffered, but they are moving forward. You know, this is a war this is a tragedy. This is a death that's far greater than anyone knows. When the real numbers come out, you're going to see numbers that you're not going to believe. And then he goes on to talk about the Middle East. That's it. That's honestly, that's his understanding of the war and how to finish it. Ukraine are in trouble. Ukraine are in trouble because that is word salad, it's nonsense, and he's deeply, deeply ignorant of everything. Just, it's bad. It's bad. That is bad for the leader of the free world to be expressing geopolitical nuances in those ways is bad. If you're a fan of Trump, and even if you're America first, yeah, Trump's the right person, like, you'd still like him to understand what he's talking about. That shows he doesn't understand what he's talking about. Yeah, but Trump, America first, yeah, Trump, great, isolate, yeah, he'll isolate you. He doesn't understand why. He doesn't understand anything. The man is not fit to lead the United States of America. End of. And you can find that out by listening to him talk. Right, I had to take quite a few hours off to go and see my son play football and complain about a referee. Terrible. Anyway, so I'm back now. What I think I can conclude about Trump is I know some people are upbeat about Trump. Greg Terry, for example, he's completely changed his tune, it appears, on Trump now that he's been elected, and I find it very difficult to do that because of literally what the man says. I mean, if you read and listen to the entirety of everything Trump has said about Ukraine for the last whenever, you have to be really hopeful that he's actually going to go against what he said. Like, there is nothing in here or in anything that he says that is remotely pro-Ukraine. Like, there is just nothing. He doesn't appear to really want Ukraine to prevail. There's nothing here. So I challenge you, and I'm very much like Phillips O'Brien here. I might be wrong, but you need to show me where I'm wrong, because there's nothing that the man has said. You can hope that Keith Kellogg might do the right thing, that Mike Waltz do the right thing, but it would be despite what Trump has said. And therein lies the problem. The guy right at the top of the administration is not a fan of Ukraine. Okay, and it all gets more complicated because the chap who was involved in the whole Burisma thing, who was behind the story of Hunter Biden and Burisma, the ex-FBI informant who accused President Joe Biden and his son Hunter of netting millions of dollars in bribes from Ukrainian energy company Burisma, has admitted in court that the whole story was a dud. It was all made up. In a plea deal, Alexander Smirnov admitted he completely fabricated the conspiracy that became central to a Republican effort to impeach the sitting president. Smirnov agreed to plead guilty for 4 felony charges, which include 1 count of obstruction of justice and 3 tax evasion charges, in exchange for the end of 2 pending criminal cases against him, according to court documents. Honestly, the whole Hunter Biden Burisma thing has fallen apart. This should be like absolute mainstream news, top of the news agenda, considering how much time has been spent trying to hammer the Bidens over Burisma. As Karen Piper says, this is sickening and should have led to the charges against Hunter Biden being dropped. Just absolutely incredible. As MT Wheelher says, in a plea deal, Alexander Smirnov admits he fabricated the bribery allegation against Joe Biden that Representative James Comer and Chuck Grassley and Bill Barr championed and led to the collapse of Hunter Biden plea deal. Incredible. Here is the, I think it's his court transcript. The events defendant first reported to the Handler in June 2020 were fabrications. In truth and fact, defendant had contact with executives from Burisma in 2017 after the end of the Obama-Biden administration and after the then Ukrainian prosecutor general had been fired in February 2016. In other words, when public official 1 could not engage in any official act to influence US policy, and when the prosecutor general was no longer in office. Defendant transformed his routine and unextraordinary business contacts with Burisma in 2017 and later into bribery allegations against public official 1, the presumptive nominee of one of the 2 major political parties for president, after expressing bias against public official 1 and his candidacy. Lies, defamation. It's just absolutely incredible. And yet, I bet you, as I've said, that very little will be done about this. Brad Heath says, remember the FBI informant who claimed President Biden took millions in bribes from Burisma? He admitted today in federal court that he made the whole thing up. And that he started spinning new lies after meeting with Russian intelligence. I mean, to me, this is sickening. Interesting excerpt here from, this is the Sean Ryan show. So remember I was talking about how out the top 20 podcasts that you can watch, like Joe Rogan, etc., on Spotify, the top 20, the majority of them are really right-leaning, really kind of either politics or politics adjacent podcasts that are not going to naturally sit unfortunately aligned with being pro-Ukrainian. And Sean Ryan show, which is I think the second most popular one, is one of these adjacent ones where it's a kind of a military one, but definitely, you know, anti-democrat, etc., as far as I can work out. Anyway, this is exactly what you want to hear on these kind of podcasts, which is getting someone on to say, there are some issues with Russia.
To Russia, right? You know, so
this is Sarah Adams, a former CIA targeter, telling the American people that Russia is about what Russia is all about.
Talked about this in our October 7th report. So the terrorists actually decided to do the Israel attacks after Russia invaded Ukraine. They're like, it's a really good time. Everybody's focused on Ukraine. So they started the plotting in March of 2022. When they started the plotting, the terrorists reached out to Russia and said, is this going to be okay? And Russia's like, go for it, go for it, go for it. So when Zawahiri was killed and Al-Qaeda's like, we're not doing this attack October 7th because the U.S. will come and bomb all of our locations in Afghanistan. We'll lose our base. They reached back out to Russia, and Russia's like, no, do it in 2022. Don't wait. I need to get this pressure off me from my war in Ukraine. Well, fast forward to these. There is information that Russia is helping bring in some of the tools necessary for Al-Qaeda's homeland attack.
Say that again.
There's information that Russia and Russian pipelines are helping bring in some of the resources that are going to support Al-Qaeda's homeland attack. And it's to
into this country?
Yep, to push at us for Ukraine. Just like we're doing stuff against Russia.
So hold on.
Push
so
at
let me
them
get this
against
straight.
Ukraine.
So Russia's sending supplies into the United States to help with the terrorist homeland.
Their pipeline is helping move some of Al-Qaeda's supplies in the United States for their homeland attack.
Which is probably our own fucking supplies because we left everything there.
So.
Am I right?
I mean, it's a different kind of supply. I'll tell you what the supply is. But it is a Russian channel, reportedly, that the supply has moved through.
So that's Sean Ryan trying to blame the US. You know, that was stuff that we left in Afghanistan. It's like, no, actually, it's not that stuff. It's other stuff. I'll tell you about it, but it ain't that. Interesting. Shashank Joshi says of The Economist, and again, no particular left-winger, watching Trump administration job hunters publicly and effusively praise every Trump statement or nomination, however self-evidently batshit, is really something. So you've got this situation where there's a number of people that are being suggested for positions like Pete Hegseth, and we'll look again at Tulsi Gabbard in a second. You know, you're now starting to see people come out and overtly support them in a way that is just, you know, kind of crazy. They shouldn't, any other administration, any other point in time, these people wouldn't get a look in. It's crazy times. Tim Miller, interesting here, talking with Anne Applebaum. It's a great interview. I suggest you go and watch this. I've just finished Anne Applebaum's book, Autocracy Inc. Also, her book, her book, Twilight of Democracy, is a fabulous book too.
So I am curious your take on fake news, Carrie Lake running the Voice of America potentially.
So here's another really bizarre choice. I've talked to you about how BBC World, the World Service, BBC World Service, is an incredibly important part of our outreach, our information outreach in the world. Like the UK, it represents the UK's kind of interest, but you could call it, if you're against the UK, you could call it propaganda. I wouldn't call it propaganda. I would say it's like proper information that's trying to get out to the places that need that proper information. The BBC World Service is really, really valuable. In the US does this with Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Liberty, but also Voice of America and some other media outlets. Right, and they have just put nominated Carrie Lake as being in charge of Voice of America, which is like Fox in charge of a hen house, like a disinformation queen in charge of trying to promote US narratives around the world when her sense of what the narratives are completely skewed. It is just another batshit crazy nomination. And then to go back with people who support, I just don't get people who are supporting Trump at all, like in terms of national security and you know, pushing the America's interests around the world. and then putting these people in to positions that are just insane for those people.
So Voice of America is one of a group of U.S.-funded foreign news services. There's RFE-RL, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. There's Cuban radio. There's an Arab language radio. There's a group of, I mean, they're called radios, but they're not really radios anymore. They're media properties. There's Radio Free Asia, which has, I think, or it used to be at least the most Uyghur language broadcasting of any outlet outside of China. They play a really important role in, or they could play a more important role in countering Russian and Chinese propaganda outside of the United States. So there is an enormous effort to shape narratives and conversations in Africa that the Chinese invest in. They've actually invested billions and billions of dollars. I mean, way more money than we spend on Radio Free Europe and all those media properties put together. The Russians have a huge investment in information campaigns of different kinds in Europe and Asia, elsewhere. One of the few tools that we have is Voice of America and those other properties, which are designed at least to put it's not so much they're not meant to be American propaganda. I mean, I'm sure sometimes that's what they are, but mainly they're designed to be, outlets that build trust because they report things that are true. They're meant to be, to contradict.
This is a really important point, because that's why I said, some people might call it propaganda. I wouldn't, because it's not that these sources are lying to, for example, in Europe, to Russians about Ukraine and the US and Russia. They are countering Russian propaganda lies. They go on national TV and they lie. They put out disinformation around the world to purposefully misinform people. Voice of America and Radio Free Europe isn't that. They're not lying to people. They're saying this is the actual narrative, this is the truth, and this is the reality of why Ukraine needs to be supported, blah, blah, blah. So the Russians might call that propaganda, but in reality, they're not really comparable. And so I'm really glad that she made that distinction there.
The Russian and Chinese messaging, they're meant to build a different set of arguments, mostly, as I said, in third countries. I mean, they're most important in places where where the U.S. and the democratic world are competing directly with the authoritarian world in narratives and in arguments. Yeah. The idea that Kari Lake would be the head of Voice of America is absurd on many levels. I mean, she has no journalism experience. She has no public diplomacy experience. She's a liar.
She was a local TV anchor. So.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, she hasn't run, as far as I know, she hasn't run a large international media institution. She, and of course she's a liar. I mean, she's somebody who supported a false narrative about multiple elections, actually, Trump's elections, her own elections. And actually,
she's basically involved in a court case about lying. Just what staggering, and they go on to talk about that, but it's just another staggering intended appointment. It's just absolutely incredible. Yeah. The largest individual donor to Tulsi Gabbard's PAC in 2021 is an apologist for Vladimir Putin, who runs a non-profit that aims to foster cooperation between the US and Russia. That's who supports Tulsi Gabbard. Going for Director of National Intelligence is just insane. These nominations are insane. Let's hear from Chris Murphy on this, who pretty much nails it.
After Trump left office, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, went and did a massive deal with Saudi Arabia, in which Saudi Arabia promised billions of dollars to invest in Kushner and his properties that the Trump family benefits from. There is
billions of dollars.
No doubt that this administration's policy towards the Middle East is going to be compromised by the fact that they are making money off of the very people that they're sitting across the table from and supposedly having a conversation about the interests of the United States. I mean, it's just extraordinary that we have allowed for the normalization of Trump's financial empire to be woven into the statecraft of this
Trump is going for Trump Tower Jeddah in Saudi Arabia at the moment.
Country. All that matters is how much money he makes, how much money his family makes, and it comes at a cost to the rest of us. We'll see really bad policy made in the Middle East because he's got unqualified people there, but more so, he's going to put his wealth and his family's wealth first, the national security of the country second. After Trump,
and you know, I keep arguing with people like America First Patriot. It's like, it's not America first, it's Trump first. It's not make America great again, it's make Trump great again, or similar. Incredible. Okay, I thought this was an interesting statement. I watched the whole Joe Rogan show and realised that, like Tucker Carlson, he only invites pro-Russian guests on and then says, wow, I didn't know that. And that's it. That's the whole show. And he is just an apologist for pro-Russians and refuses to get pro-Ukrainians on. Absolutely incredible. That's gone. I can't show you that. I've been talking a lot about tech bros, about Peter Thiel and David Sachs and Elon Musk. I don't know if it's worth playing this now. This is a single worst answer to any question I've ever seen on any television anywhere in the course of history. For the television I've ever watched, and it's not particularly apropos to anything, although I often slag off people like Peter Thiel for being techno-authoritarians. He's asked, what do you think, by Piers Morgan, what do you think about I will play it to you because it's got to be seen to be believed.
And to those who think this shooter is a hero because he did it because he said this healthcare executive was presiding over a healthcare system which kills thousands of Americans by denying them cover, what would you say to them?
I don't know what to say. I think.
Oh, you don't.
I still think you should try to make an argument, and I think this is you should, there may be things wrong with our healthcare system, but you have to make an argument, and you have to try to find a way to convince people, and change it by that. And
good luck with that.
This is not going to work.
Peter,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there are all sorts of things one could say about it, but
try and say them.
I don't think, and I think I think the motives feel. I don't want to go into all the particulars here, but
we haven't gone into any particulars.
I don't think there's anything heroic about him.
Well done. Okay. God, that's painful. Oh, I had to play you that, but I didn't like it. Right. We've heard that Meta is giving $1 million to Trump's inauguration. You've got Amazon now giving Jeff Bezos giving $1 million to his inauguration. You've got another tech setup giving some money as well. I forget who it is. Just be very careful that you are starting to get an alignment. There's all the checks and balances against Trump and this presidency that's just about to start. Everything's aligning. There is just complete fealty. I find this deeply, deeply worrying. That I keep telling you, you've got a growing autocracy in the US, and nothing that's happening at the moment is suggesting it's anything other than that. When you've got the people who you expect, Washington Post, Amazon, Meta, and all the entities owned by Zuckerberg's Meta, just here's a bunch of money. So as long as we're on side, don't want to fall foul of you. This is what you see. This is what you see in dictatorships. It is absolutely stunning. It does make me feel a little bit sick. And then you had Trump the other day ringing the bell in the stock exchange. JD Vance says, ready to ring the bell in New York Stock Exchange. President Trump will lead a great American comeback. As Sophia Nelson says, comeback from what? The best stock market in history? The lowest unemployment in history? The greatest infrastructure investment in history? The best post-COVID growth economy on earth? Like, what is the comeback here? People need to understand, how well the American economy is doing at the moment. What comeback are you talking about? And it's really interesting that having said he got in on inflation, he's now saying, well, actually, it's going to be very difficult to bring prices down, which is true, right? But the problem is he campaigned on that. Prices only came down significantly in the Great Recession, which is not what you want. Like, prices don't come down. Like, we know that. What you do with inflation is you get it under control. So inflation is negligible or less than average wage growth. Right? If you got it that way round, then things are looking pretty good. But you don't go, you start going to the realms of deflation, you've got a recession on your hands. And the problem is that Trump literally promised that. As Arthur Delaney here says, Donald Trump didn't just vow to end inflation. He said repeatedly prices would come down at like every rally, and gives you two examples of him saying that prices would come down. Just you watch, they'll come down, and they'll come down fast, not only with insurance, with everything. We'll end inflation and make America affordable again, and we're going to get the prices down. We have to get them down. It's too much. Groceries, cars, everything. We're going to get the prices down. I will cut your energy prices in half within 12 months. That's a lie. He won't do that. That will not happen. We will cut your taxes and inflation, slash your prices, raise your wages, and bring thousands of factories back to America. You can't go, well, you can evidently go out and just promise the world to people. They suck it in, you get elected, and then you go, oh, it turns out I can't do that. Turns out that's actually pretty much impossible. And I was just randomly promising you stuff. And then he's saying that, you know, basically he's just promised to anyone that invests a certain amount of money, he's going to slash environmental legislation for them. It's like, yeah, as long as you invest, you can ruin the environment. It's not a problem. We don't really care about the environment. Meanwhile, RFK is standing at the side going, you what? Just watch RFK's face as Trump explains the environmental and other regulations he spent a lifetime fighting for will be waived for foreign billionaires. Anybody investing $1 billion or more gets a very expedited approval process, you know, and no environmental legislation. But as well, let's talk about RFK for a bit, because he has, his lawyer associated with him, the lawyer helping RFK Jr., RFK Jr. pick federal health officials. The lawyer helping RFK Jr. pick federal health officials for the incoming Trump administration has petitioned the government to revoke its approval of the polio vaccine. Do you know how seriously damaging this kind of approach to running the American government is going to be? It just blows my mind. And Mitch McConnell, who's got a close relationship with polio, has come out and said, he's just come out and issued this statement. Like millions of families before them, my parents knew the pain and fear of watching their child struggle with life-altering diagnosis of polio. From the age of 2, normal life without paralysis was only possible for me because of the miraculous combination of modern medicine and a mother's love. But for millions who came after me, the real miracle was the saving power of the polio vaccine. The polio vaccine has saved millions of lives and held out the promise of eradicating a terrible disease. Efforts to undermine public confidence in proven cures are not just uninformed, they're dangerous. Anyone seeking the Senate's consent to serve in the incoming administration would do well to steer clear of even the appearance of association with such efforts. You are going to start seeing some serious fighting amongst Republicans, as you should do, because some of these nominations are bonkers. They are bonkers. And just the final thing, this is, again, it's not to do with Ukraine, but I just want to get you to understand that someone comes in promising to cut inflation and to get rid of 13 million illegal immigrants. You've got to understand the ramifications of that. But look at the fact that you've got someone here who voted for Trump, Trump said he would do those things, and those things would ruin this man's livelihood. And yet he's just kind of hoping that Trump won't do them. It's the idea that someone says they're going to do something, you vote them in thinking that they're not going to do it. And you've got this bizarre situation where it's either like you're lying to the electorate, or the electorate don't want to believe you, or so many different options for just what's happened to telling the truth to the electorate of what you're going to do and then going and doing it, which is what you'd expect with the illegal immigration situation. But you will be destroying, in this case, the agricultural industry. This is a fascinating interview.
What percentage of your workers are not U.S. born?
It's
Probably half.
About half?
Yeah.
South Dakota farmer.
How many hours does this go on?
It's 24 hours a day. You know, we could milk 8 hours a day, but it wouldn't be feasible or profitable for us to produce milk.
So you need workers like this year-round?
Yes, yes.
Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota, her farm is just a few miles away. This farmer who voted for her, who voted for Trump, who still supports them, doesn't believe that they would round up immigrants and ask them for their immigration status, because it's an open secret that farms in this state are held up by undocumented workers.
Now, this is what Jake Brose said right at like months and months ago. He said, the reason why illegal immigration hasn't been sorted out is because it's baked into the economic system. If you want to sort out illegal immigration, then you find people who employ illegal immigrants knowingly, like this farmer. The problem is, you do that, you have massive inflation, because they then got to go and find those workers from the indigenous population who are not prepared to do that. So you then have to attract them in with very high prices. Plus, you're going to have a labor shortage anyway, because you're suddenly getting rid of 13 million people. This is hugely inflationary, and it's also impractical to the point where you just can't employ those. The Americans aren't prepared to do those farming jobs.
Are you worried, like some of your other farmers, that if there were a mass roundup of undocumented migrants, that you might lose workers? You might not have enough workers.
Well, the question I asked, how are they going to do that? Within 2 days, we will not have food. There will not be food anywhere. 2 days? Yes. That's why I predict nobody will be filling the shelves, nobody will be producing food. If we once have to shut down and be gone, it's never coming back.
Does Governor Noem understand that?
I would think so.
You have a lot of faith that they're not going to do what they're saying.
That's pretty much what I'm thinking. So we have to trust in our officials that are put in place.
We have to trust that our officials are not going to do what they said they were going to do. Because if they do what they said they were going to do, food production would shut down within 2 days. Does Kristi Noem know that? Yeah, I think she does. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. You have some serious issues in the US. This next couple of years is going to be nuts. And I, for one, am not someone that is all that confident that Trump knows what he's doing. Really. He knows what he's doing to get elected in. He definitely knew that. It's like play on fear, immigration, inflation, and not sending our money to foreign wars, right? But his solution to all of those things are deeply, deeply problematic. He is a rank amateur, I think, in running a government. I think that was showed, but everyone's got very short-term memories. I think that was shown from 2016 to 20. Just read his words. Read his words on Ukraine. Listen to his words on Ukraine. You may be someone that's got ultimate faith in him, but you have to have faith that he will do, just like that farmer just said, that he will not do what he said he will do. In order for Ukraine to prevail, action will have to be taken that is not in line with what he's actually said. And that's a weird kind of faith to have. If you think Trump is going to be good for Ukraine, he will have to go against what he and many people around him have been saying with 100% of what they've been saying. That's an odd faith. Maybe he will. Like I've been saying, Trump could accidentally do the right thing. I don't say that he won't. I'm not saying he won't do the right thing. He might still do it, but it won't be based on anything he's previously said. It will almost be by accident, or because it'll be for the wrong reasons. Anyway, that's enough for me. Let me know what you think. Lots of people keep having a go at me for having a go at Trump, but it is very difficult not to when you literally, these are his words. These are his words, and they are deeply, deeply troubling for Ukraine. Convince me otherwise. In the meantime, please help out with the awesome fundraising that we're doing for Trucks Under the Christmas Tree. We are now up to 13,327. That is absolutely incredible. Well into first place now. Thank you so much for all of those people who have been super, super generous and have helped out. Do us proud. We can do this. All the best, and please subscribe. See you soon.